and welcome to another episode of Talking with Friends, this time brought to you by our new sponsor, Rode. That's right, we all have Rodecasters, and we have Rode microphones. Man, everyone's going to sound good today. We are here, so let me introduce everyone. They can all say hello so you can hear how good they sound. First, he is to my left, or you. I don't know how it looks on screen for you, but either way, it's my brother, Mr. Fred Shernoff. Fred, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Oh, like that Barry Manilow sound right there. Speaking of Barry Manilow, next up, Calvin Tan. Calvin Tan joining us here. How are you, sir?
I'm great. I'm loving this Rodecaster Pro here.
Yeah, it's good. It sounds good. And of course, Matt Mangol, who needs to be given the proper credit for not being the last one on.
Damn right.
Not being the one to have problems with it technically. Matt Mangol, everybody. Mangol, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you, Mr. Rode, for the microphone.
Yes, Mr. Rode. Thank you for sending this to us. But no, hey, you know what? Honestly, this is so cool that Rode believed in our show enough to sponsor it by sending us a lot of equipment. So we are excited. And today, I mean, I even have this new set, all that Rode money coming in, you know, I was able to build this nice new set for myself, display the old TWF belt, and that little picture right there. That picture is from we're all in that. That's our picture from before TWF Armageddon. But you want to learn about that, go back into the archives available at FITE. Let's talk today. Last time we talked all about the current state of the WWE, and we said we were going to talk about the current state of AEW, but I'm going to put this out as a vote to you guys because something else was bandied about last time, if you remember. We talked about ideas of topics we could discuss, and one of those was promos. And I was thinking that might be even more interesting for us to talk about than the current state of AEW right now. What do you guys think?
I think promos is the way to go, brother.
Let's do it. So, promos. I guess the conversation here is a lot of people on the internet wrestling community, the IWC, if you will, they will jump on anyone who delivers a bad promo, and they will instantly attack the terrible, terrible writers. It's a big thing we see in WWE. We've heard stories going back a long time of Bill Apter had told us stories of seeing Chris Jericho reading over a script and how it broke his heart to see somebody with such creativity having to read from a script. But on the flip side of that, I have always looked at it as it's not an excuse. Just get better or don't get the job. Because if it's part of your job description to be able to wrestle in the ring and to be able to look a certain way and to be able to perform promos, how is it any different than acting in a movie or a television show?
It's absolutely not different.
That's the thing. So that's the argument. So we'll start. Calvin, you were saying, let's start with you. Like where, because I think we can all see both sides of the argument here. So what do you prefer? Let's start with this. What do you prefer? Fully written out promos or just the idea of giving the talent bullet points?
I would go with bullet points because, you know, there are really good actors out there that really do their job well in the world of movies, right? And not everyone's going to be a great actor. Just like professional wrestling, not everyone is going to be great at that. You're going to have people at all different levels. But I think in terms of believability, when delivering their promos, I think what will help some of the talent that, you know, can't make a fully memorized script believable is probably bullet points, because they can add a little bit of themselves in there, which does add to that believability.
So that's an interesting one. Then Fred, will jump back to you here. To me, I've always looked at it as, well, you know, just the same as acting, the same as television. Fred, you have a lot of experience on the stage, which is more so than television itself, would probably be more equivalent to pro wrestling because it's live and it's out there.
Right.
And when you would do, you've been lead roles in theater productions before. You you talk about, oh man, they had to cut this like 15-minute promo. How could they remember all their lines? Well, you went and did a 2-hour show and somehow remembered all your lines, but you had a lot more time
That's
to
what I was going to
practice.
say.
So yeah, so talk about your opinions on here.
Well, I think, yeah, when you're comparing it to theater, usually there's a lot more time to rehearse and days and days, and I think it's hard to compare that to wrestling where it's going to be changing. Every week is a new script, a new play, so to speak. I do think there's a place for some scripting. I think that helps some talent. Not everybody's going to be really good at ad-libbing and improv. I think there's some people who are just have a natural knack for that, and I think it's also an understanding of your character. I think that's even if you're talking about televised or stage improv, you need to know who you're supposed to be. And I think especially some younger talents or people who are just stepping into a particular role, they don't understand the character enough to say, okay, well, here's the bullet points and what would your character say in this situation? They don't even know because they're just
Right.
thinking as themselves. So I think I think there's sort of a right place, right time for both situations. I think it also depends on the goals of the promo. Obviously, the primary goal is going to be to get over whatever the upcoming match is or the feud. But I think when you're looking at the big time and the higher levels of like a WWE, and you look back, especially around like the Attitude Era, and a lot of it wasn't just getting over a match or getting over a feud; it was getting over the merchandise and the catchphrases, and to like somebody like Rock. And I mean, obviously one of the best at delivering promos, but I can't remember too many promos that really got me excited about a particular match he was going to have. It was more
Right.
like he's just going to entertain because he was comfortable in what his character was. And I think he probably was, not heavily scripted, especially in those days. And I think he put a lot of time into it, figuring out the catchphrases that were going to get over and that was
Right.
going to, be part of that marketing machine. So I think it's a lot. You can't necessarily compare a top level talent who's established, who's been given certain instructions of what to do versus somebody who's just getting started and who needs a lot more hand holding and direction.
So it's interesting that you say that you bring up The Rock because since he happens to currently be the biggest movie star in the world, but if you look at The Rock's acting career, that started after him being at the very height of The Rock in WWE, it was not an easy transition. He was not a particularly good at it's not like he was instantly like I guess what I'm saying is for as incredible no one could hold a candle to him as he was as The Rock on Raw with that microphone in his hand and that live mic. When it transitioned into him doing movies, it wasn't on the same level. I'm not saying he wasn't good, but I'm saying it wasn't like where you went, oh my God, he is not only the best in the WWE, but now he's the greatest actor we've ever seen in a major motion picture. So I think again, it comes down to what you're saying, Fred, the character, because
Right.
and that's where what Calvin said about the bullet points and about allowing the people to infuse an aspect of themselves into it, because they think you have to have that. And that's pro wrestling is that it's so unique. It really can't fit into a specific box. And that's why the sports entertainment name works. And I know that a lot of people don't, sports entertainment is a bad word to real pro wrestling fans. But I think, and to real pro wrestlers, but I think they're wrong. I think that the reason that they think sports entertainment is something bad is because of the taste that they get from the largest form of it, which is WWE, and they don't like WWE's version of it.
Yeah,
But
and you could tell who gets their character today, right? Like if you look at Brock Lesnar today,
yeah,
cowboy farmer Brock Lesnar, he gets his character today, and I think that's why they're giving him more mic time.
yeah.
You look at Seth Rollins, he gets his character today, and if you compare that to when he first started out, it's night and day.
He's a character now, whereas there was a time where he was like playing heel. You know, he's like, well, I'm the
Yeah.
bad guy now, so I'm gonna do my laugh, and I'm gonna carry myself the way that a pro wrestling bad guy does. And no, I think that's true. Roman Reigns. I mean, talk about a guy. Some of those, if you haven't, look up online. There's somebody put together a compilation of all of those things, and I've talked about, I feel like on this show before, where it's like close up in it, and they put subtitles of what he's saying in the ring, like while he has a guy in a headlock, and he's like, "Look at the size of my arm. My arm is huge. I'm crushing your head right now." Like he's so good because he just figured himself out, and I would bet anything that nobody went up to him and said, "Hey, Roman, tonight we're thinking when you put that headlock on, we're going to want you to say these exact words." Like, no, he created that. I would bet anything that he created that. But it goes back to, again, and then Matt, I want to get your opinion on this too. It goes back to, Fred, what you're talking about with like The Rock. Obviously that's a guy. It took him a while. He was the antithesis of successful in the beginning because and I actually liked Rocky Maivia. I was like, hey, this guy's kind of cool. Because obviously Dwayne Johnson has the it factor. So that's why, you were drawn to him in a way. But man, like once he was able to just be himself, it really worked. But, and I want to bring up this one thing, and then we'll go to Mangol. You can start with this and then carry on as you would. But for as much as you go, well, The Rock, man, he was just himself, and they turned it up. Stone Cold, he was just himself, and they turned it up. And then there's The Undertaker, where arguably the very worst of The Undertaker was when he put too much of himself into the character. So we'll get around to that because I'm sure everybody has opinions on that. But Mangol, what's your thought on bullet points or scripted stuff?
Well,
having experienced that yourself, you've experienced that.
Yes. So here's the deal. So with Undertaker, just before we get into it, but Undertaker, so it's an entertainment company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're very sure not say it's a wrestling company. It's an entertainment company. All right, if you're an entertainment company, great. Let's focus less on overproducing all the tech crap and everything else that makes it seem like you're watching a movie and kind of makes it feel kind of unreal. And worry about overproducing talent, not in having them memorize things that are 17 pages long, where you're going to just change it last minute anyway and go, oh, forget about page 5 and 6, which is going to make someone feel really confident with that. That's the problem with memorizing. Overproduce the talent in the sense of find the right people for the right jobs, cast properly.
Yes, and thank you.
Or
you used to listen to the After Chat, didn't you?
A little bit. Okay. If you have all these characters, the proverbial box of gimmicks, whether it exists or not, I don't know. But the thing is, okay, some characters you just kind of put off you come up with a different one, or you take a couple things from 2, make a new character. This is for this guy. Cast the right people for the right roles. If you hire a janitorial engineer to work for NASA and deal with the moon landing, and you don't train them, guess what? You're screwed.
I believe they prefer to be called custodial managers.
Yeah, well, engineers hire. It's a VP level.
That was a little meat for the base.
My thing is this. Okay, wrestling's about connecting with the audience. Okay, wrestling is about real. Okay, being real. If you're not real, I turn the channel. You know how much I watched Raw in the past 3 years? Maybe 20 minutes.
Okay, but hold on.
Hold on. But when it comes to promos, hold on a second.
Okay.
Bullet point what you need to get out of it to get to the next thing that you're going to be doing the next show. Okay. Other than that, have the guy or woman whoever, go back, work on some things, come to that agent or whoever wrote that stuff with 3 ideas and work on that. Let him and you mold it. That's your jobby. Overproduce that way. Get the job done. So if you change something last second, the guy's not freaking out. He knows, okay, I just have to switch this thing around.
Right.
If you switch something on somebody last minute, which always happens in the wrestling business, like it does, I guess, movie business and stuff like that, they change things. What are you going to do? Oh, you're out there in 2 minutes. Like,
right.
make the guy feel comfortable.
And that's
make
tough.
be real, but comfortable in what they're doing.
So that's kind of the thing. You're saying wrestling.
Yeah.
What you want to see is you want to see something real. And I totally get what you mean. What you mean is you want to be able to suspend.
It's got to be believable.
Right. You want to be able to. Right. You want to be able to suspend disbelief when there's a reason where if you're somebody's into like Marvel movies, I don't think any of us really thought like Captain America was real when he showed up, in that like final battle with Thanos. Like it wasn't where we were just like, oh wait, this is really happening, guys. No, they told a story that gripped us so much that we were so invested that it did not matter to us. We were able to suspend disbelief. We were able to shut off the part of our brain that goes, oh, that's the actor from that other movie, whatever, because we just were able to sit back and be entertained. And I feel like, so that's what I think you mean when you say real. But I also think, though, Mangol, there are aspects of it that you mentioned that I agree with completely. And when I made the joke about listening to the after chat was, I used to talk all the time back then, and this was a number of years ago, about Baron Corbin, where he was, what were they even calling him at the time?
Some wolf.
Like Constable Corbin or something. No, what were they calling him?
Yeah, Corbin, it was Constable Corbin. He was the GM.
Was it really Constable Corbin?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
It sounds horrible. But anyway, I used to rag on him constantly, and Bill would be like, you don't like Baron Corbin, and I used to always like stop and say, I have no opinion. I've never met Baron Corbin. I have no opinion on him, other than what I will tell you is when I first saw him in NXT, I was like, oh dude, this guy could be something. And what I kept saying was they gave a guy, they casted that role, they cast the role inappropriately. They didn't cast the correct person for that role. They looked at Baron Corbin and said, we want him to be this, but he couldn't be that. In the same way that you're not going to go to me and say, all right, we're looking for a biopic on Arnold Schwarzenegger. Josh, this is it. Now here's the thing. I never blamed Baron Corbin, because if someone came to me and said, we're going to pay you to star as Arnold Schwarzenegger in this biopic, I'm going to go, well, I'm like not at all who you should be choosing for this, but not my show. All right. Pin me, pay me.
I feel like that's getting into a little bit into the idea of whether the gimmicks that they're assigning to people fit or make sense, which is related, is a little different than
we can hop off the promo topic. The whole thing, it's a launching pad here, to kind of just talk. So
no, I think I agree with what you're saying. I think that a lot of times you have to look at it is what we said before about the people finding their own voice. Someone mentioned Brock Lesnar and where he's at now, and that's sort of like extension of yourself. Though it doesn't have to be like Undertaker and a lot of he's probably the most successful, but the successful kind of bizarre gimmicks like Goldust and things, that like where it's not necessarily about just cutting a standard promo. The gimmick is kind of like interspersed into everything that they're saying. Right. Everything is following that. And I think, again, it depends on the performer. That some people are going to be able to handle it. But I was going to say earlier that I think it's a question. Sometimes I think, Josh, you had said earlier about, the people being in the wrong roles and the comparing it to actors and saying, well, if you can't, this is your job description, I think you said, right? So that you're expected to wrestle a match, you're expected to cut a promo. And I think it's a question really of whether that is the job description of a professional wrestler, because it seems like it should be. And it goes into the argument about sports entertainment, that this is sort of a unique thing in a lot of ways, that it elements of athleticism and it's the acting part of it. But more often than not, wrestling has used it not as the minimum, I guess, the minimum hurdle to get to be a professional wrestler in the big time. They use it as the differentiator from the lower card to the ones who have the it factor and the ones who make it. They say, oh yeah, all these guys can work a match, and they couldn't get over on the microphone. You know, that's
But
that. So is your argument? That's my question. Is your argument those guys, and we could name 100 names from past, present, guys who didn't, someone could say, well, they just couldn't get over on the microphone, whatever the case may be. Do you feel those guys shouldn't have been in the big time at all? And that the WWF and or WWE in that level should only be guys who can work and sell on the mic?
No, because again, there is the uniqueness of what professional wrestling is. But I also, as I think I speak for all of us when I agree, there's the lost art of the manager. And was the point. When you had and we'll use Bobby Heenan as an example, or in the case of, Bobby Heenan is the greatest of all time, in my opinion, but a Bobby Heenan, a Jim Cornette,
Sherry.
Let's talk about, let's talk about Stan Lane, right? Do you guys know, was Stan Lane a good promo? I don't know. No. But I can picture Stan Lane standing behind Jim Cornette cutting a great promo. Sure. And the thing is, but I knew Stan Lane could go in the ring. So, what a random name for me to pick out. But that's kind of my point, though. You looked at the Heenan family.
Right now, I would say Paul Heyman is probably the best.
And has been for going back to the Dangerous Alliance. Paul Heyman was one of the best.
That stable would have been great had it stayed around longer. Well, here's the thing. So the successful wrestlers, whether it's on the mic, not on the mic, or in the airport and someone sees them, you sell. You're selling yourself. You're through selling your character and yourself wherever you are.
Connecting.
You're selling your merchandise. People that don't sell in the ring, outside the ring, whatever, they tend to come and go. All right. Now, with Lesnar, it took him 20 some years to get to where he is now. Right. As far as
how comfortable he is.
Right. So the thing is, there were periods where it got kind of old in there when he could come back. So it's good. It's different. And he's also in this character selling more. Like if he's in the ring, he's selling. Like Eric Bischoff talks about this all the time in 83 weeks. You have to gain sympathy, right? So the thing is, characters that can gain, whether you piss somebody off or you gain sympathy, right? There's the two ends of the spectrum, especially when you're on the mic, when you're in the ring. All of it gets you over, right? If you can just wrestle but you can't connect, now that's where a manager comes in, whether it's the manager that does the stuff for you and helps you along the way. Eventually, then you turn on him and you do your own thing because you've learned over the past year or two from being with him. Like there's all ways to do it, and they should know better by now. Like and they have other things like NXT, someone can go down to and come back up, or
I guess who knows what's happening.
There's a lot of things they could do. The main thing is it's got to be somewhat believable, right, to connect. But The Undertaker, he went for so many years with this. People ended up buying into this character, right, of resilience, Michael Myers-esque, sitting up, this and that. So when he went too real, people pushed it away. You know what I mean?
Well, yes and no. We pushed it away. But in a way, there was a whole other audience that didn't really remember the dead man, and those people accepted the hybrid that came later because they were like, "It's the Undertaker. This is our classic Undertaker." Well, you also have to after a while. Well, you also have to remember too. He had evolved, and so it's a funny story about the Undertaker
when he was biker. I mean, when he was all biker,
right? But so funny thing about the Undertaker, and it's very interesting. Yesterday, I have a display in my office of a bunch of different figures, people I've worked with, Hasbro collection, whatever. I found this figure of the Undertaker, Hasbro Undertaker, and I have one that I bought recently that's for display that looks looks good condition. I have the one that I played with as a kid. When I played with that as a kid, the Undertaker went from gray gloves to purple gloves. And he started getting tattoos. And I was not thrilled because in my, I wasn't Matt Cardona who would use the yellow singlet Mr. Perfect as Sonny. For me, things needed to be a little bit more the way they were. So I went to my big brother right over there, Fred, and pretty much told him what I need. And he went and painted this Undertaker figure to now have the purple gloves and like the buttons, the big silver buttons that were on there. And he even did some, which I got to tell you, was pretty impressive work to simulate the tattoos on the arms. And so when I found that when I was going through some things, I was like, that's pretty cool. So I put that in my display case, just kind of like on the bottom, but just like, that's a fun one. Well, my son, who is, he will be 5 next month. He saw it and asked if he could have it and is currently, I think, sleeping with it after he took it to school with him. And he asked me, but he has some random wrestling figures that I'd given him over the years, so some of my old figures. And he also has some new ones that I've bought him. And he knows The Undertaker because he has these other figures of The Undertaker. And he asked me, why doesn't he look like that one? And he pointed to one that was like the American Badass. And he said, and why doesn't this one have the thing on his head, meaning the bandana? And it was modern day, like Undertaker with the singlet and the pants and all that. And so I actually brought up a picture of like Undertaker through the years and tried to explain to him that he kept changing the way he looked. And that's why there's all these toys of different things. And it made me think of that, not only to put over Fred's artwork, but also it made me think of something really interesting about that and about his changes, because he never touches the American Badass one. He kind of sometimes would play with the modern day one, and he would play along with it with Kane. Loves Kane, the Kane figure, because it's old school Kane, and fell in love with this old school Undertaker. Because to him, and he had him lined up with a Skeletor figure. Now he's into all that. He's into the bad guys, the things like that. But it goes back to a conversation we've had so many times before that Fred has brought up a lot, which is gearing things towards the kids. When we were growing up, did promos matter as much as they do today? Because they didn't have the depth to them. And you see how I'm sure you're all like, how is he getting back to this? But I got back to it.
They would throw it up during a match.
It would be that,
Jake
or
Roberts.
Jake Roberts promo. But it's why you remember Jake Roberts as a promo, because he was so unique in that regard. But even
Jake, you know what? I also remember Razor Ramon's promo. Yeah, sure. Hey Chico, with
because there was
chains and the character. I mean, Jake. I mean, he had the snakes and everything, but Jake was closer to a more standard promo, and he stood out because he spoke so quietly. I think was really
because he brought you in. But but I mean, it's, and you're saying like Scott Hall, and Mangol's rocking the NWO shirt right now. The wrestling world just lost Scott Hall, which really sucks. But you look at that time, and I mean, a great example would be Diesel versus Kevin Nash versus the Kevin Nash that then came back and feuded with CM Punk. So Diesel, not really much of a promo. I mean, it's kind of, hey, Diesel powers. Like, it was like, all right, we get what it is. It's the new generation. And in a lot of ways, Diesel was doing like almost like a Hulk Hogan impression, right? Like being that, trying to fill that void. But Kevin Nash in WCW and even Kevin Nash in TNA, go out of your way to find Kevin Nash. Just like Google Kevin Nash X Division and look up those promos. That man was some of the most entertaining stuff going on in the mid 2000s.
He really was. Yeah, he was like Kurt Angle's therapist for a while. He did some great.
He did some really, really great work. But when he came back in that convoluted, I got a text message or, from someone that, I need you to, whatever that was with the CM Punk thing, and they just destroyed whatever that could have been. And what a missed opportunity. But I remember him doing his promos, and you could tell that they wrote stuff for him and that he wasn't comfortable. And he was just, it was like he was back to being uncomfortable like when he was Diesel, as opposed to, but you'd hear so often, there's guys like a Brad Armstrong's always talked about, of like where people will tell you, and none of us ever had the opportunity to meet Brad Armstrong, but anyone who ever knew him and spent time with him in the locker room would tell you, if that guy could have translated who he was in the locker room out to the ring, holy crap, he would have been a star, because he was amazing in the ring as a technician, but it didn't work. And so that goes back to, Fred, what you said, which, and guys, I want to know your opinion. I'm talking a lot because I'm excited about this topic, but, and because I talk a lot, but, Fred, it goes back to what you were saying of, should we just, you can't come to WWE because you're just not a good promo. And my answer is no. That's when you need to look at them and say, how do we make them work? Because that is the uniqueness of professional wrestling.
Yeah, there's a flip side of that where you do have these wrestlers who may have been given bad gimmicks that make something of it, right? Like I thought when I first saw the New Day, I thought that was gonna fall flat on its face.
Yep, and it actually kind of did.
Yeah, it kind of did in the
beginning,
but they. Biggie, Xavier, and Kofi, hats off to them.
Mm-hmm.
They made it something big.
They really did. No, that's a great example, because that was, but again, that's personality. If you look at it and you go, well, what made it work for them? Well, first, they eventually realized this power of positivity thing in the beginning that Vince McMahon saw as them being these baby faces. In some ways, maybe you look back and you go, Vince saw something that even the fans didn't see and even the New Day didn't see,
right.
But we eventually got there, because the power of positivity now, when you say that doesn't give you that disgusted feeling that it did in the beginning with the New Day when everyone started going, New Day sucks. Because now, but what made the New Day so special, from what we understand, and again, we're not personal friends with any of those guys, but from what we've seen and understand, when you see the New Day out there, you are seeing the real human beings. And sometimes with a guy like Big E, I'm not entirely sure he's even turned up at all. I think it's just that man. That's the man who likes, big meaty men slapping meat. That's that man's thing. And shout out to him. And I hope that he, because I know he watches, but I hope that he heals very quickly. And thankfully his neck injury was not as bad as it could have been, because that was scary as hell. But yeah. So again, it's, I feel like we could do this whole thing where we argue ourselves. We argue our own points. And that's where wrestling becomes so unique.
Well, there's so many different sides of it. And I think too, we're talking about the way that certain gimmicks appeal to the younger audience and the suspension of disbelief and everything, but just the way that the business has changed. And I think, I always look at there are multiple parts of the business. So when I say the way the business used to be, I think of WWF in the 80s, and I know there was always other, more traditional type wrestling, but I think it was Mangol said something, I think, about they used to pop up with the little box where they cut a quick promo, during the middle of the jobber match. And I think, and you had, for the bigger matches and for Hogan and people like that, you had your backstage segments with Mean Gene and all that. But I think the expectations have changed a lot too with the advent of the Attitude Era and the arrival of this sort of the male soap opera, which led to this form of promo. And I'm not saying it was never done before or anything, but the long, drawn out, paced in-ring promo. is very different than what the expectations were. So I mean, obviously, we were looking at things in the '80s as kids, so it's easier to get anything over with kids, and I think so. We would see any of these goofy characters, or Jim Brunzell, or any like anybody who's wrestling on primetime wrestling or whatever it was. It didn't matter. Okay, they're big stars. It does, they don't need to be able to talk or anything. And I think it got to a point where there is this expectation that you're going to be able to follow a format, if not an actual script, at the very least, a structure of how to deliver this long in the ring promo that became part of like even Tough Enough and all that. They would ask these guys, it's in wrestling schools, you stand in the ring and you give your promo and you don't lean on the ropes.
Yeah.
Well, do you think that's because Raw is a 3-hour show and they have to fill time?
I think that's part of it, but
they were doing it. They were doing it before, and then they kind of extend. And I think they almost were like, "Well, hey, we could just do 5 15-minute promos, and sell more, ad time." I'm sorry, no, Fred, you're saying.
I mean, this is kind of just an observation, but I guess the question becomes, if wrestling as a whole, or a particular promotion or something, if someone were to turn the clock back to where it is more this fast paced, the box pops up and you cut a quick thing in gimmick and you move on, does that open up more opportunities for wrestlers than this continued expectation that someone can stand there in the ring and capture the attention of the crowd for 15 minutes? I think
maybe because go back in time and you can look at a guy like a Jake Roberts, who I believe could have handled today's style of promos, but the Ultimate Warrior wasn't cutting a promo. How was he main eventing? He wasn't opening Raw with a 15-minute promo,
because he wouldn't be able to wrestle because he's blow himself up.
Yeah,
in the promo.
But no, I think it's a good point. But also at the same time, like when you would do these like little bursts of things, like think about the Rockers back in the day. It would just be like, we're here, we're rocking and rolling, and we're heading to the ring, blah, 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 that, and we're going to go show you what we can do, and boom, and then the music hits and they're off, right? Had it been like the Rockers are out here now to cut a 15-minute promo in the middle of the ring in front of the crowd to tell you about their upcoming match with whoever, like, I don't think it would have worked. I don't think so. I think it's it all comes down to who is it? Who is it that is doing this promo? And I think that comes down to back like what Mangol had said, where you have to, that is where you should overproduce. That is where the focus is. Now, I will say, Matt, you did mention at one point about it being entertainment, and we didn't need to have, do we need to have all this stuff where it's overly polished and overly, and there are two arguments to that. One is the argument in its favor, which is we are a $1 billion company here that puts on the cleanest, most beautiful presentation of sports entertainment you could see anywhere, with the screens and the lights and this and that, and everything is, crisp and an 8K camera following you to the ring and all this stuff. But the trade-off is you've lost that sense of urgency. You've lost the sense of, to me, you're no longer able to suspend disbelief, because pro wrestling is not supposed to be, in my opinion, presented like a movie. Pro wrestling is supposed to be presented like live sports. And so when you present... What's that? No. No, I was just saying, and when you present it as a movie, then honestly you're kind of presenting it as a movie that I don't really feel like watching, because
so
how many
live
like
sports, right?
Yeah.
The purpose of watching live sports is to see who wins, right? Mm-hmm. But how many of us watch pro wrestling to see who wins?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. When we were kids, we did.
There was a time.
We watch it to see what happens in the story.
Right. Yeah. But if the story's being told well, then you should want to know who wins.
Right.
You
should care about who wins.
Right. And so that's when it's like, well, you you were looking at my wife the wrong way, and and then I'm just kind of like, I don't care who wins. I just want, let's just move on from this storyline. Like it's time to move on. But there are stories that can, like, I mean, I've watched an AEW. I've watched matches where Dax Harwood and CM Punk opened up Dynamite this week, and had a hell of a wrestling match. It was really good. And they have done such an interesting, they're such an interesting company in the way that they present things that you don't always know what's going to happen. That I was watching going, I really don't know. Is this going to be a thing where Punk's putting over Harwood and we're like, and maybe we're off to some sort of singles run with him? Or is this a thing where he's showcasing him and then Punk's still going to get the win? Are we going to get some retribution from MJF is going to come out? Or like, and I was curious. And I mean, was I sitting there going, biting my nails going like, oh my God, CM Punk has to win this match. He has to. No, like, and I'm sure there were fans doing that. That's just not who I am. It's not where I'm at.
I agree with you. It's the same. I watched Thunder Rosa versus Britt Baker with the same kind of, I was curious who would win that cage match, and
it doesn't matter to you. Right. It's not like you were going to walk away. And if Thunder Rosa wins, like, it's not the same as like when we're all Philly guys, when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, that was like, you had this, like, we all had this pride, like we won something. Right. And like Calvin, I know you're a huge hockey fan. Like if the Flyers were to ever win, something. So it's like, there's that. We don't have that for Thunder Rosa. I didn't have that for Britt Baker. I don't have that personal investment, but I'm invested in their story.
And I was just thinking, as you were just talking, I was thinking about it. When I watch WWE, I fast forward through the matches, but I tune in to, like, if I see Paul Heyman in the ring and he's talking to Roman Reigns, or and to see what happens in the story. And when I watch AEW, I watch all the wrestling matches. Yeah. I wanted to see that match between Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker in the ring and see what happened in the ring, what they did in the ring.
So why though? And I think I know the answer, but why? Because WWE it's not that WWE has bad wrestlers, because you can't say WWE has a bad wrestler and then also say all WWE wrestlers then went to AEW and now they magically became incredible wrestlers. And I know that's not your opinion. But what is your take on that? I mean, anybody, like, what's your take on that? Because I do the same thing. I want to follow the story of WWE, but the matches for me. So Calvin, why for you do you not watch the matches?
For WWE, I would say they're too predictable. So
formulaic.
Formulaic. Yeah, most of the matches are formulaic. Where when you watch AEW, it's out of, it's stuff that that I don't normally get to see. It's different. I think the wrestling in AEW is more entertaining than it's not as formulaic like WWE.
Do you think, and Mangol, get your opinion, we haven't heard from you in a bit, but do you think that it's kind of like when you look at the WWE, you're looking at it as a larger picture saying, okay, we know wrestler A and wrestler B are going to be facing each other in 3 months at this pay-per-view, which will probably be the third time they faced each other because they'll do it every pay-per-view and probably every other week in like a tag match or something. But you look at it and you say, these matches don't matter because at the end of the day, we already know come Mania, here's your main event. So who really cares in the meantime, where we know all of this is filler? Whereas with AEW, whatever their next pay-per-view is, I want to say, is it Double or Nothing maybe? Is their next pay-per-view? That might not be right. They haven't been around. They haven't established enough for me to remember what happens when, but I think that is their next one. But I don't know who's wrestling. I can't predict in the way with WWE. You can predict 6 months out you can pretty much get a feeling of what your major, be it SummerSlam or Survivor Series or WrestleMania or Royal Rumble, you can start getting like a pretty clear feeling of the direction that we're heading. And then you can go like, okay, here's the formulaic way of how they're going to do it.
Booking a year in advance.
Right. Yet we hear all the time that they're tearing things up. Are they tearing up? But what are they tearing up? Right? Like, what is Vince McMahon tearing up? Is he saying, I don't like that this segment happens before that segment?
Of a particular show, not the overall.
Not the overall story. So, Mango, what do you think? What do you think as far as, like, do you think, because I know that you've mentioned many times that you have not really been able to watch WWE, that it grinds your gears.
So back in the early 90s, I fell out of, probably after the whole Lex Express nonsense, kind of fell out of the old loop with that stuff.
Yeah, well, you should fill everybody in. Poor Matt Mangol stood on the corner of the street waiting for the Lex Express to come by every day.
Oh, yeah.
Every day before school, every day after school. Matt Mangol would be there.
And they were still filming that same promo that took 42 days to film with him and his family in front of the fireplace. But anyway.
Hey, but listen, it all led towards that spot with Ludwig Borga. So,
the price of wood has come down, but they're still pretty successful with that 2x4 sale.
But what makes your price of wood go up?
So here's the thing. So, he's on that. So here's the deal. So what got me back in the wrestling was I just kind of happened to have Nitro on. Scott Hall walks through the crowd. I go, well, this is interesting. Anyway, and then I started watching Nitro. I didn't really start watching WWE again until maybe 97. I was start flipping back and forth.
Best year
so
I think.
So intrigue. Just being a little slightly curious, and the whole thing of it was different, and you didn't know what to expect. Okay, so that brings you in, and once it brings you into enough, a couple weeks, then you're going to be watching that. Now the thing is, with WWE, there's nothing to draw me in, unfortunately. Right. AEW is interesting because they focus on wrestling entertainment. WWE is trying to do 25,000 things all across the globe, and look, hey, you make money, awesome, that's fantastic. But it's not wrestling entertainment. It's entertainment that happens to do wrestling sometimes. Mm-hmm. So it's different. Now, the thing is, AEW, they don't overproduce their stuff. I mean, the wrestling, they do, and they're being better with story. But when was the last time you saw a match and you jumped out of the chair afterwards and you were like, whether you're pissed off or whether you were like psyched? Okay. It's been a while. But there was a period, 90, maybe 95 till maybe 2004, because you had some matchups of Angle and Brock, where you would do that. And at least at the Big Four pay-per-views, one of those matches is going to get you out of your seat.
And I'm sure there's ones that we're forgetting. But I can tell you, for me, the last time that I remember doing that.
You have to at least try to bring people in. These days, they hotshot everything. So they'll start a story, end a story 4 weeks later. Okay, well, I don't give a shit.
We didn't give it enough time to breathe for anyone.
If you didn't care enough to write it, why should I care enough to watch it?
Let me ask you all of this. Yes. All of this question. When was the last time you saw something in wrestling that was like a mind-blowing moment?
I can tell you from a match or a moment.
A moment.
I would say
it could be a match. It could be a match, but a moment.
Hogan Rock.
For me,
mind blowing.
I would say, for me, and 3 out of 4 of us were there. Cody and Dustin.
Oh yeah,
that match.
Yeah.
That whole match. The irony of Cody coming out there and smashing the throne.
Yeah. Sure.
The match at the end, where Cody got on the mic and started to cry when he, asked Dustin to be his partner at that other thing. Like that was a moment. It also was such a good match, but I have to look at it fairly and say this was AEW's first pay-per-view. They had been building this up with like a road to the event where they had these where Cody cut this amazing promo about the Attitude Era. and about how pretty much how they have to get out of the way, how their time is over and it's time for these new guys. And it was so emotional, so well done. It was a lightning in a bottle situation, but I do remember watching that and going, I am pumped for this. Like there were things like we had the opportunity for All In, and I was like, oh, All In, like this is so cool to be here and to have this opportunity. But there was nothing on All In that made me jump out of my seat.
Yeah, that was a wrestling moment, you know?
Yeah.
Like, well, so what about you, Fred?
Moment, so we're talking like actually like a match?
Well, I would say both, right?
Match,
for me, it happened to be both the moments and that match, but
there was supposed to be a moment that didn't pan out, which was the return of the Undertaker when he was a hybrid. That was a moment. I mean, up until he walked out that with the return of Paul Bearer and everything, that was a moment that I mean, I was excited for. I think I'm trying to think like I like sometimes like returns, certain things. The return
like
of Brock,
when Shane McMahon returned.
I was gonna say Shane McMahon's one.
That was a big moment.
My favorite return was probably Lesnar back from UFC when he interrupted John Cena, and nothing so special happened there, but it was this feeling like it made me want to keep tuning in because I'm like, all right, we're heading down a path. I'm going to see some cool stuff. Match wise, I would say, I mean, I'm going back a long way, but I mean, I would say probably Samoa Joe, Kurt Angle when Angle was arriving in TNA. That where I'm thinking like we're suspending disbelief, and I'm just like psyched to see what these guys are going to do.
That was a moment too when Angle showed up and he headbutted him, busted him open and everything. You talk about moments that I will never forget that promo where the whole thing and then Angle like looks up and like the whole time you're watching this promo and you know this is very obviously Kurt Angle, but still there's that doubt because you're just like, no, this is TNA. Like Angle's not coming here. Like what's going on?
And
when he lifted up his head, you're like, holy, you know?
Yeah, and it seems like those moments are few and far between.
They are
right these days. For a good number of years.
Even then, it was and we don't get into a whole thing of like what went wrong with TNA, but a lot of us, Mango, I don't think you were too into it at the time, but the other three of us.
No, Mark Mess turned me off. He was tearing him up, ripping him down. That's archives anyway.
But Calvin used to come over and we would get the TNA pay-per-views, and for a while that was like in the heyday of the X Division and the rise of Joe and AJ Styles and these guys. We were so into that, and it almost felt like they were building this really special thing, and then they get Kurt Angle on top of that, and yet. I feel like it kind of fell apart right after that, So it's like, so I think in some ways it does seem like those moments, they're not just few and far between, but they're unsustainable. I don't know if that's an expectation thing, but it's like always downhill after that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it's not going. I remember Shawn Michaels being announced in the NWO. Like there's unfortunately. There's always going to be the come down from no matter how high you get. The higher you get, the longer that trip is back down because you can't stay up there all the time. And so I think
actually CM Punk coming back was a big moment. I tuned in for that.
That's true. CM Punk coming back was a big moment. But CM Punk now feels like just another part of the show, a great part of the show, an important part of the show. But it doesn't feel like the thought of CM Punk being back in a wrestling ring. And I think the one now that we're all waiting for is Cody in WWE. I think we're waiting because, and I don't know if we're waiting because, damn, we just want to see Cody Rhodes again, or we just need to see Cody Rhodes in the WWE again. We're waiting because we want to see what does that mean? What is Cody Rhodes back in the WWE? I'm not looking at it going, will there be great matches? Could we expect a really great match out of like a Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes? Absolutely. And if that ends up happening at Mania, which has been the rumor, like that could be a show-stealing great wrestling match. But to me, it is the whole story around it and specifically the promo. The first promo that Cody is going to cut because of every promo he has cut since he left WWE was all about how what he's doing now is better than WWE. All the way down to breaking that throne on his way to the ring and everything. So now, to me, that's the promo that I'm waiting for right now. And on that note, I feel like any final thoughts on promos? What can we do to fix them? What can we do to make them better? Fred.
Make them natural.
Oh,
sorry.
Mangol. No, that's fine. See?
Go ahead.
That wasn't written. We didn't write.
Natural.
Make them natural.
Yeah. Make sure. I think the focus has to be not as much on feeding the particular lines. I think the focus has to be on making sure that the talent understands their character, whether it's a character that's an extension of themselves or whether it's a character that is really leaning into a gimmick, like a real, like played up persona. Understand the character, so then you don't need to have the hand holding. Then you can ad lib. Then you can kind of just wing it because you know what your character would say in that situation.
Yeah, 100% with that, Fred, because even if things change or there's a mistake made in the ring or even on the mic and somebody doesn't hit the cue or say what they have to say, if you know your character, you can ad lib and it would be perfectly believable. It would fit in there.
Well, there you have it, everybody. I think the answer is focus less on what you're writing and what's being said and focus more on developing those characters and making them know who they are, why they're there, what's their motivation, is the big acting term. What is the intent of that character? And the intent should always be to win. That's it. When they come to the ring, their intent should always be to win their match because they're a professional wrestler. And they get paid to wrestle and win their matches. And we get paid to do this, right? We get paid to, right? My check's coming, isn't it? No? Anyway, thank you all so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun. Always great to kind of talk about these things. Let us know what you think. Give us your opinion on promos. Tweet us at the TWF Show. Let us know what your opinions are on this. Do you think that Mangol was just completely out of line? Do you think that Calvin made great points? Do you think Fred was somewhere in between? Do you wish that I had talked so much less? Let us know on social media. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/so says Shernoff. That's where you're going to find Talking with Friends. Oh, wait, you're also going to find on a little place called FITE TV. So go to FITE.tv and check out our archives of Talking with Friends. Guys, anything else you have to say before we wrap it up?
Speaking of promos, how long was your last promo?
My last promo?
15 minutes.
It's still happening. This has all been one long promo. And we hope that you will join us. We hope you'll join us next time for more of Talking with Friends.
I feel like I'm looking out Forrest Whitaker's left eye.
Okay, all right. So we solved a bit of a problem. So I got it to connect to Ecamm, but my OBS needs to my OBS failed.
Did you take something for your OBS?
Okay.
Fred's got something for you, I'm sure.
Imodium.